What's going on YouTube? Welcome in, I am LuboATM as always, and welcome to another video here on the channel. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be going through all of Dead by Daylight's 25 killers now, I think it is, and I'm going to be saying the one change I would make to these killers. Some of them are good, some of them are buffs, some of them are nerfs, some of them are just general kind of changes to just make them a bit more fun or a bit more effective. No real rhyme or reason to it. I just thought it would be a fun video to do, because I'm always, if I'm on stream or if I'm playing, I'd be like, oh, I really wish this was a thing for this killer, or I really wish this killer could do this, or I wish this killer didn't do that, and sort of stuff. So I just thought it'd be good to make a video. Obviously there's like, as I said, there's like 25 killers, so I'll try and keep it as brief as I can. I don't want to be putting out like an hour-long video here. So we'll jump straight in and we'll look at our boy Trapper. So the one change I'd make to Trapper is pretty standard one. I think it's the same change most people would make to Trapper, and it would make the default number of traps the Trapper can carry higher. So I don't know whether that would be like a yellow Trapper bag or whatever is standard, but with Trapper you kind of struggle enough in matches with pressure and things. If you can only carry one trap, then as soon as you lay one down, you're basically just an M1 killer and have nothing going for you. If you can at least have the ability to have multiple traps, like two or three at one time, you could obviously like trap things up as you go. It'll make it easier in the early game, which is where Trapper really struggles. So I think that would be my main change for Trapper. Next up is the Wraith. So the Wraith, I wouldn't actually make a lot of changes to. He's obviously recently went through a massive rework, and I know it's kind of divisive. Some people love it, some people hate it. The one thing I would change about Wraith would be I would reduce his like mega lunge coming out of Cloak. Like they've obviously increased his movement speed, they've slightly decreased his decloak speed, but the speed and the length of your lunge when you come out of like Cloak just seems ridiculous. Like it's virtually just guaranteed hit every time, which is kind of unfair from a survivor's point of view, because there'll be times where you're playing a tile really well, or you've timed something really well, but just purely the basis of like the speed you come out of, or the speed boost you get coming out of uncloak, just makes it like virtually impossible to do anything with. So that would be my only one, is I'd maybe do something to either reduce the speed or do like you can either increase the amount of time it takes to come out of cloak, or slightly reduce the speed once you've uncloaked. I'm not entirely sure which one, but one of the two. Hillbilly, which is, as you can see from my level, is like virtually one of the only killers that I don't play on the regular. My change I'd make to Hillbilly is just I would relook or rework or something the overheat mechanic. I think it's something that's really sad that Billy was and still is one of the favourite killers amongst the Dead by Daylight community, but when they brought in the overheat mechanic and did the changes, he lost a lot of players and people had a lot less fun playing him. So that would probably be my one change for Hillbilly. I don't play him often enough to really make any more kind of in-depth kind of, oh, like the curving should be better or the curving should be more strict. I don't really have that experience, but from what I do have experience of, I'm not a fan of the overheat mechanic. A secondary one to touch on is not really a change to Billy. I think if they could do something about survivor movement, because like it's very hard if you're like back revving a survivor as Billy and they're teleporting left and right and there's no way to really kind of track their movement. Makes it very difficult to play a killer like Hillbilly, who is very dependent on being able to track movement accurately. So that would be my change for Billy. Next on to Nurse. Nurse is obviously a very difficult one, because Nurse is probably Nurse is the best killer in the game if you are good at Nurse, but if you do not know Nurse, or you're a new player coming into Dead by Daylight, Nurse is ridiculously difficult to learn. So the change I would have for Nurse, I wouldn't really do anything with her power. I think the kind of risk reward idea of the skill ceiling you need to acquire to be that good is fair. I think that it's good that not everyone can be at that level, because otherwise you would be in the same position as another killer who's further on this list. So I would maybe just kind of look at reworking our add-ons a little bit. I think some of the add-ons that are strong, or like really strong, are like ridiculously overpowered on very good nurses and make it like a miserable or a nightmare to go against. And I think some of the poorer add-ons don't really do anything for newer players. I mean, you've got like, was it the horse, the wooden horse that lets you see where your blink's going to, which is fine. It's good. It's a good thing for learners, but it's not learning about where, like, where your pointer's going to go. It's muscle memory. So I would think that you could probably do some stuff with the weaker add-ons to make her slightly more manageable for newer players, and also maybe sort of reducing some of the strengths of some of the ridiculously powerful add-ons, so that when you get people who do have hundreds of thousands of hours on Nurse and are that top tier, they aren't as just unplayable as they are at the moment. So that would be my change to Nurse. Huntress is another difficult one, I think, for this list, because I don't think there's actually a lot wrong with Huntress. I think Huntress has both very strong strengths, ironically, and also very weak weaknesses. You know what I mean? So I think it's very easy to see what our strengths and our weaknesses are. I think it's a very good balance between like the movement speeds and the projectiles and things like that. I don't think there's a lot there. The one thing I would change about Huntress is the refrigerator style hitboxes on the hatchets. It's like completely like ping and server dependent on when you can be hit and when you can't be hit. I just find it very frustrating. There's times like where you turn corners as a survivor, like round the corner of Shack, and you still get hit with hatchets even though you're long gone, things like that. I think it is a lot more manageable as well, because they've shown that they can refine hitboxes and make them an adequate size with killers like Pinhead with the chains, like Nemesis with the tentacle strike. So I just think that the kind of the days of the refrigerator hitboxes for Huntress should be kind of re-looked at, because I think on the whole she is a great killer. I just think that you shouldn't be able to, there shouldn't be as big of an area to hit with your hatchets, and good Huntress players will hit you whether the hitbox is large or small anyway, but it stops survivors being hit unfairly or being hit based on the killer's ping. Obviously it needs to be more accurate. I think it just basically would be my next one. Okay, so Michael Myers. So actually, I probably should have said at the start of the video, I was at a gig last night. I went to go see Bring Me the Horizon. So my voice is very hoarse and stuff. So if there is like any weird kind of cuts where the background music kind of just stops and starts again, completely different bits, it's probably just I've had a break just so I can get some like juice, so I don't completely lose my voice before we get to the end of this ridiculous length of killers. Yeah, so Michael Myers. I just think Michael Myers is probably one of the worst killers in the game, and I don't think I'm alone in thinking that. I just think struggles really badly in the early game, dependent on map and dependent on survivors' positioning and things like that. Like the process for Myers is get to tier 3 as quickly as you can in Snowball, but it can be quite difficult to get to tier 3. So my change for Myers would be a rework to the tier systems and make it more beneficial when you get to tier 3. So like sort of similar stuff to, like, I know you do get some benefits, like you get a speed increase and things like that, and obviously it's ridiculous to say this because tier 3 is a one shot down, but it only lasts for a limited period of time, and then you kind of you basically drop down a tier and have to start all over again. So like even if you were in tier 3 to have like faster vault speeds, or like considerably faster vault speeds, considerably faster like break animations, things like that. I just think that I don't know what specifics you would put into it. I just think that it's so punishing sometimes going from tier 1 to 3 as Myers. I think there should be more reward, because you also only get a limited amount of tier 3s, so therefore you've only got a limited amount of benefits from that, whereas you don't have a limit on how much you're hindered when you're not in tier 3, if that makes sense. So that would be my idea for Myers. Hag is another one. I'm not a big fan of Hag as a killer. I find her very, I don't want to say boring to play as. I don't like the idea that it's basically like instant hits by complete luck of where you put your traps. Obviously if people don't have a flashlight, then their only way to burst traps is to run through them, which puts them in danger. You know, I'm just not an overall big Hag fan. But the change I would make would be I would dramatically increase the radius of where traps can be placed around hooks, because especially while perks like make your choice Devour Hope and things like that exist, basically you're just saying that you're getting like you can get like an instant down, or it's basically like proxy camping hooks from a massive distance, because you know as soon as anyone goes for the unhook, you can be back there instantly and get the hit. And I think that there should be like similar with like Demogorgon's portals, where you can't put them too close to generators or exit gates and things like that. I think just the increasing the radial distance of where traps can be placed around hooks, I think would make it a lot better, because you obviously when you see a hag, well, when I see a hag, I assume there'll be a Devour Hope or a Make Your Choice in play, and most likely it is, and it's because when people go and make the unhook, you're just out with the range. As soon as they hit the unhook, you teleport back, hit the person unhook, and you just recycle hooks that way, and it makes it very unengaging from a survivor point of view. Okie dokie. Doctor. So for Doctor, again, I don't think there's an awful lot wrong with Doctor. I would say the change that I would recommend for Doctor is making a slight buff to his shock therapy, because obviously at his core, Doctor's an M1 killer. He can't like take health states away from people with his ability. It does give him tracking and does put him up madness, but realistically, when people get to tier 3, unless you're in a chase, they'll just go instantly back to tier 2. So for me, I think it would be a quicker charge time for the shock therapy charge. And the reason for that is that obviously it's such a delay when you're charging it up that you lose so much distance, and if you miss it or you miss the timing, it's ridiculously punishing, especially at kind of lower rank, well, higher MMR now, sorry, not lower ranks. I just think it's one of those ones that, like, if you have a quicker charge time, yes, it will probably be a bit more of a pain for survivors when it comes to blocking windows and things like that, but I think from a Doctor's point of view, since all he has really is his M1, you can afford to give him a little bit more leeway with his shock therapy, to get some benefits out of that, because I think that if you do miss a timing or you miss a shock therapy, you've lost that much distance round a loop, you're basically back at square one again, and I think it can be very punishing if you're trying to learn or trying to get better. Bubba. Where do we start with Bubba? Right, very, very simple change actually. There's not really, like, there's a lot wrong with Bubba, and there's a lot wrong with certain things that come with the way people play Bubba. So my change to Bubba would be to try and combat that. Like, obviously a lot of Bubba's camp just purely for the basis that if someone comes for an unhook, you can basically guarantee that you down those 2 survivors. So my change would be to try and stop Bubba's having that ability, therefore not being able to have them down. Like, if someone's being unhooked in the middle of the animation, you can't just automatically down 2 people at that point, because it's unfair on the team, because they need to come for the unhook, they need to come save their teammate, and basically if there's a face camp in Bubba, is nigh on impossible, and if multiple people come in, just more people at risk. So I would either remove the ability to down 2 survivors with a single charge, or remove the ability to then do 2 survivors when someone's been unhooked. And I think that would alleviate a lot of problems with face camping or basement camping or things like that with Bubba. I think removing the ability to down 2 people with 1 charge would make that incredibly better for the community, I think, and Bubba would probably be a lot more fun to go against from a survivor's point of view, while still being able to generate ridiculous amounts of pressure. It just feels as if when you play against people who plays Bubba, sometimes that if it feels like the game's getting away from them, they revert back to that tactic of, I'll hook someone, I'll stand by close, if someone comes for the unhook, I'll just down the 2 people straight off hook. And even if they've got borrowed time, the speed you have with your chainsaw means that the speed boost from BT doesn't really gain you any distance, and you're going to go down anyway as long as they've got enough charges, which is basically more than 1 charge, you know what I mean? So that would be my change to Bubba. Freddy is a difficult one for this video, because obviously he just went through a whole rework a fair bit ago, and then he's had another full pass of like his add-ons and some things to do with his power and things like that. So it's quite difficult to say what you would change, because I'm far more happy with Freddy now than I was like 6 months ago. But for me, I would do something around balancing his teleport, and I don't think it's a direct nerf I'm talking about. Like, I don't think it needs to be, but I think you could balance it to make it slightly more fair, because I think the dream state, like, the add-ons don't, the add-ons now are garbage, right? So you can't really get any add-ons to help improve your play. So you're basically fully perk reliant, and the teleport combo with certain perks like pop and things like that make it very hard for survivors. So like I would try and balance it, and just for an example is you can instantly teleport to a generator after you've hooked someone. There's like a brief, like maybe 10-second or 5 to 10-second cooldown after you've hooked someone before you can teleport. But when you do teleport, like, all generators spew the blood and give you the fake Freddy, so none the survivors don't know what one you're teleporting to. Because just now, obviously, you get the map-wide sound, but only the generator you're teleporting to spews the blood without the add-ons. So if someone's working on a gen, hears that whooshing noise, know they're safe to keep working. You know what I mean? Just stuff like that, just a balance to make it a little bit more... that you can't instantly hook someone, teleport over, pop the generator because you've got barbecue and pop running. But something that if you do something like that, then other survivors who are other gens don't automatically know that they're safe, if that makes sense. So that would be my change to Freddy. And Pig. Pig is again another interesting one. I think Pig has a lot of good things going for her. I also think there's a lot of bad things going for her, but her kill rates kind of speak for herself. For me, I would say the change, it's weird, I would have two changes to make to Pig, but one's just a really personal one. Which is having combat straps add-on as a default. Like, it just feels so nice, but I wouldn't recommend that as like the wide change. But if they could make combat straps as a default, I would be very happy. But for me, I think the main change for Pig is I think her bear traps need to feel more of a threat rather than just a kind of secondary time-consuming objective, if you know what I mean. Like, you need to get the trap off, therefore you need to take time to go around the boxes. But I don't know about anyone else watching this video, but I never have a pig trap put in my head in a game and I'm automatically concerned that I'm going to die to that pig trap. I'm just more frustrated about the fact that I have to come off objectives to go and take it off. So I would say, because the dash attack isn't great, like as a stealth function, it's the weakest stealth function from any killer. It's weaker than Wraith, Ghostface, Myers in tier 1. The ambush is okay. So like it's weird that you've got like two kind of average abilities to try and make up for, or to try and make up the difference. So for me, I would definitely say making the bear traps feel more like a threat. I don't know how you would do that if you added more boxes and made the RNG more difficult, or you decreased the timer so that it would be like clutch every time. I don't know, because then obviously you'd have people abusing it. I don't know how you would do it. I just think that the bear traps need to feel more of a threat rather than a frustration, especially since it is one of our main powers. Clown, again, Clown, I don't really have a lot of problems with Clown. I actually really like Clown. I'm not the biggest fan of the rework in terms of the addition of the other bottles. I don't really see that many times where you get that much benefit out of it than other maybe closing down some slightly frustrating loops. It doesn't really give you that much of a buff, so I don't think he's in a bad spot. But for me, the change I would make to Clown is to rework the Pinky Finger Iridescent add-on. I think the Pinky Finger is most definitely in the class of Iridescent Head with Huntress, and obviously Iridescent Head with Huntress gives you a massive debuff or a massive nerf of your ability, that you have far less hatchets to carry. And I don't think it's fair that you have an insta-down mechanic with Clown, but you have the same amount of bottles to achieve it. So if you get really close to a survivor, you have 5 attempts to get them insta-downable. You know, I know that you've got the follow-up hit from that, but the slowdown from the bottle basically makes that guaranteed anyway. So I would say rework the Pinky Finger add-on to make it similar to Huntress's Iridescent Heads. Not exactly the same thing, you only get 1 bottle, but I don't think you should get your full complement. If you're going to get an insta-down out of it, then that would be my change. Had to take another one of those breaks, and it was just because I knew who was coming next. Spirit, the one change I would make to Spirit is just delete her out the gate. No, I'm kidding. I don't like Spirit. I just think she should. I know she was more broken than she is now, prior to other changes coming in, but my lord, she is horrendous to go against. My changes would be, there's a lot of different ones you could go down the route of, but the one I'd probably go with is remove aspects or attributes from her phasing to make phasing less ridiculously powerful, because the movement speed the duration, everything about phasing is ridiculous, from closing down space to tracking down survivors, from like basically if you hook someone, barbecue, see someone at the other end of the map, you can pretty much be right at them within like a second or two. So I think removing attributes or removing benefits from the phasing, like I'm not saying all three of these, but like footstep sounds, blood on the ground, scratch marks, if you removed some of those attributes from phasing and make it harder for Spirit to identify where people are, then it's more around using your phase for skill rather than basically closing distance and getting a guaranteed hit. Yeah, I don't really want to spend a lot of time talking about Spirit. I could be here all day. But yeah, I'd reduce the amount of benefits you get during phasing. I think would be a smart change. Legion is an interesting one. Legion for me is a killer that I do like to play. I know Legion gets a kind of mixed review around the community about how good or bad or annoying and whatever Legion can be. I really do enjoy Legion, which is weird considering when you think about basically they are just basically an M1 killer with the ability to put you in deep wounds. But so this is more of a kind of personal one for me. I hate the fact that you lose your power for a missed attack, and then you have the same cooldown as if you manually come out of your power, because if you manually come out of your power, it's because you're close enough to someone and you're following up with a hit. Whereas if you miss an attack because you've whiffed or you're playing against a kind of better survivor than you and they've been able to spin you, you then, not only do you miss the attack, but then you have a 4-second cooldown directly after it and they can gain more distance, which is very punishing. Feral Frenzy is obviously only active for a short period of time, so I would either remove losing your power from a missed attack or re-evaluate the cooldown times for missed successful frenzies to like manually coming out of your frenzy. I don't think it's fair that if I've hit someone with Feral Frenzy and then followed up and got right next to them and manually came out to follow it up to down them, that's the same cooldown as having a missed attack from like someone 360ing you, or like you like try to get hit out a window or something. Because if you make a hit out a window and the person's already through it, if you then have a 4-second cooldown, that's 4 seconds of them running in the other direction, and then also you need to navigate around the window, so it just kills any pressure you have. So yeah, that would be my change to Legion. Okay, Plague. So Plague, the change I would make is a very simple change. Again, there's not really a lot to go into it. I would just make an improvement to the projectile delay. I know it works in like an arc, but an arc obviously doesn't work when you're rapidly changing directions, so the delay from when you initiate your vomit or your corrupt or your vile purge to the time where it lands where you're aiming it to is very unrewarding. I would say it's very annoying. The amount of cooldown you need to go, or the amount of slowdown you need to go down to charge it, and then you start vomiting in a direction, and because it's going in an arc, it's taking longer to hit the projected point, and the survivor's been able to get out. I'm not saying it should be like a straight line and like super quick, but there needs to be. I just don't think that the amount of time you're cooled down and then the amount of delay it takes from your vomit to hit the designated target makes any sense. And it makes it very difficult to get value out of Plague unless you're a very good Plague player, of which there's very little around, because people don't play her for probably this exact reason, that you don't get enough benefits out of her power. And obviously she's a slower killer anyway, so if you can't get much use out of your power and you're a slower killer, most people are probably just going to play someone who's a standard 4.6 and get some sort of power or benefit out of someone else. Next one is Ghostface. So Ghostface is a slightly harder. I don't really know. I just find Ghostface is all round relatively kind of meh, but I don't know how you would make it better without making it broken. You know what I mean? So I would say Ghostface is a killer who is completely dependent on add-ons. I don't think you could go into a game competitively as a Ghostface against good survivors with no add-ons and expect to get anything out of the game. You know what I mean? So that says to me that you need to improve the base power in some sort of way, and I don't know whether that's making it harder to break out of Cloak, if it should have a faster stock time, if you have a reduced cooldown between when you're broken out and you can stock again, or Cloak again, sorry. I don't know exactly what it is, so it's hard to pin down one recommendation, but an improvement of the base power I think is probably where you would start, because if you've got a killer who's fully dependent on add-ons to be good, then it means that they're not a good killer in the first place, and they don't need to be S tier or A tier. But I would genuinely, if I was going to make a tier list, which I probably will do at some point, I would probably put Ghostface well down the lower end of it, because the amount of benefit you get out of the power is very minimal because of the amount of conditions to do with how quickly you're broken out, how much cooldowns between, how long it takes to stock, you know what I mean, like all things like that. I'm not a big fan of Ghostface. I used to be, it was my first main, which is, or not my first main, but the first killer I really put any sort of time or blood points into. But I've learned very quickly that the reward wasn't worth the pain of you had to go through in matches against good survivors once you got to a certain level. Next one is Demogorgon. I love Demogorgon. Demogorgon's one of my favourite killers, so I don't really have a lot to say in terms of changes. In terms of, he obviously just went through like a kind of full kind of repassing with his add-ons and his power, so I think he's in a very good state. My only one would be, I would still want Old Rat Liver as a default on Demogorgon in terms of like the reduced charge time for shred. I always, when I played Demogorgon before the rework, Rat Liver was literally my go-to add-on, even though it was only a brown add-on. It was always the add-on that I chose, because it just made things, just made Demogorgon feel so nice to play. And I know they made a lot of changes, improved a lot of things, but I think if they'd brought Old Rat Liver in as a default, I would have been so much happier. So yeah, that's my only change I'd have for Demogorgon. Oni is a bit of a weird one. I don't really have anything to say in terms of how Oni plays. He's also going to scream a lot, so this is going to be really annoying trying to get through this. I don't really have anything to say around the Oni's power or playability. I think the Oni's in a really, really good state. I would just say that I would like, the change I would make would be a pass on his add-ons, which I'm assuming, here he comes. Oni, do you mind, sir? Just a pass of his add-ons. Oni, come on, man. Passive his add-ons like they're doing with all the other killers at the moment, because I think his powerful add-ons are ridiculously powerful and the other ones are just meh. There's no real balance, therefore you see all of the same stuff all the time. It's always Top Knot, it's always Renjiro's Gauntlet, it's always the add-ons that make you drop more blood orbs with the Top Knot, you know what I mean, because it makes you get your power in like half the time. So I would just like to see a pass in his add-ons and kind of balance them out a bit, and kind of maybe make some of the ridiculous ones a bit weaker, and some of the just all-round meh ones, like the passive gaining of orbs, a bit better. Here he goes again. I'm going to switch before... and move on to Deathslinger, sorry. Sorry, the loud Oni noises was really annoying when I was trying to keep a train of thought. It was quite difficult to continue to focus. So Deathslinger... if any of you have watched any of my content before on here or on Twitch, Deathslinger is in my two most hated killers in Dead by Daylight, and the other one actually isn't Spirit. I'll get to them in a bit. But I hate Deathslingers. I hate them so much. Quick scoping is obviously a thing, and I'm not saying that we need to add ridiculous, like you have to have a minimum time of scoping before you do that, because I think that would just ruin Deathslinger. My change is an incredibly simple one, and I think it's just a basic increase to terror radius, or introduce a lullaby like you have on Huntress and Trickster, because I think it's completely ridiculous that Deathslinger has a reduced terror radius, and then adding monitor and abuse to that means that you can be shot out with the terror radius with no indication that the Deathslinger is anywhere nearby. A killer shouldn't be able to use their power with you having no indication that you're under threat, you know what I mean? Like, and it baffles and frazzles my brain. That's a thing. So that would be my change, just an increase to terror radius to make it either standard, or introduce a lullaby like you have with Trickster and Huntress, so that you know that they're coming nearby, so that you can be more aware that you're under threat. I just think it's completely mental that you can have no terror radius, no anything, and you can be shot and have no idea that they've been there. It's just completely mental. Pyramidhead, again, not really much to say about Pyramidhead. He obviously got a kind of slight rework in his power, which I know upset a lot of people, that you can M2 into M1 anymore, but that doesn't really bother me. I quite like that about it, because I think you used to be able to kind of get some pretty BS hits From faking an M2, you would do something as a survivor to try and juke it and then run directly into an M1 because there was no cooldown, so I'm okay with that. The one thing I would do with Pyramidhead is I would increase the duration that the trails are on the ground for. Not majorly, not like, oh, they're there for minutes upon end, but I think obviously the main strength around Pyramidhead, other than the Rites of Judgment, is obviously your use of cages and the final judgment and things like that, and I find it very easy to not get tormented when I'm a survivor. And I find it very difficult, especially if I get like a Pyramidhead daily that's like torment X amount of survivors. I find it incredibly difficult to force survivors into getting tormented. And I think that's because even if you put it down at a really strong area, it disappears after such a brief amount of time, or when you put down more trails. So I would like to see an increase in that to make it more, or make it not easier, but make it more feasible and more likely to torment survivors. Blight, again, not one of my favourite ones, but again, a very strong killer. I see him very much the same way as Oni. I don't actually have a lot to say about his power or his playability. It's the exact same. It would be an add-on, pass and rework. It's the same thing with Oni. You see the same stuff all the time. It's always Alchemist Ring, speed add-ons, improved turning add-ons. It's the same maybe 5 or 6 add-ons you see on every single Blight player. And you don't see any of the rest of them. The rest of them are meh at best, and the ones that are used all the time are ridiculous. Like Alchemist Ring is the most ridiculous add-on, maybe not the most ridiculous, but one of the most ridiculous add-ons in this game, and how it's not an iridescent I do not know. It's just crazy. But like an Alchemist Ring with speed add-on combo, you're just done. There's nothing you can do, and I don't think that should ever be the position in Dead by Daylight. There's just a point where you're always going to get hit, regardless of how well you play or don't. So yeah, that would be my change to Blight. The twins, this would be the second most hated, well, joint most hated killer in Dead by Daylight to go against, along with Deathslinger. I hate going against twin players. I think it's just a killer that's mechanics are fully designed for slugging and ridiculously unfun playstyles from a survivor point of view. So there would be a lot of changes I would make to twins. But the one that I would mainly say overall, and I think everyone says it, is an increase the respawn time for Victor after he's been kicked or he returned to Charlotte. 6 seconds is nothing. By the time you've went through the animation of kicking Victor, he's basically right back out again and right back to where you were, because he's got the 6.0 movement speed. It's ridiculous. There needs to be a much more harsher penalty in terms of respawn time for Victor. If he's kicked or if he times out and returns to Charlotte, you shouldn't be able to basically just release him again instantly, and then he goes back round again around the map and pouncing on people and slugging people and hook camping people. You know, it just, no, I hate it. I hate it, honestly. It's just, I can't say enough bad things about the twins. Honestly, I hate it, and I'm so glad that barely nobody plays them, because I think even people who play the twins see it the exact same way. So yeah, that's what it is. Trickster. Trickster was quite a hard one to figure out for me. I didn't really know what to go for, because there's just something not clicking with Trickster, I think, in terms of his ability. And as I said earlier on, not every killer needs to be an S or an A tier killer, but I just don't think they found the balance for Trickster yet. And I just think that's through just some subtle changes and some subtle experimentation around his figures. So like, he's like knife charge rate, throw rate, cooldown, movement speed, all that sort of stuff. I just think changing that stuff a little bit, like over a couple of patches, and see which one gets the best results or better results. Because I still think that the knives are too punishing if you end up getting to a strong loop, because they regret. So you could spend loads of times getting someone to one shot away from being injured, and then they hit a really strong loop and you lose all of that progress, which means everything that you've done to that point is just a waste of time. And obviously you've got the delay when you pull up to start your knife attack. You get the delay. Obviously you've got the fire rate, which obviously could be changed. The movement speed, so that if you do have bits like that where you lose a lot of progress, you're not going to lose as much ground because you'd be a standard killer. I don't know what it is, and I don't know what the perfect combo is, but I think just changing to some background figures could make Trickster in a lot better position and put him from probably those bottom ends of tier lists to at least like a B tier maybe. But yeah, that I don't really know with Trickster. It's a hard one because they've obviously done a lot of work to him and it still hasn't kind of paid off. It is better than it was, but it's still not great. It's still, I would still probably would say he's still not good. I would say he's like average at best. So yeah, that'd be my change to Trickster. 2 more to go, guys, and then we're through. Nemesis, as you all know if you watch any of my videos and watch any of my stuff, Nemesis is my main and my base. Step Nemi is the man. My main change for Nemesis, there's a few things you could do, I would say, like around hitboxes. I don't really buy into that. I think that the fact that the hitbox for the tentacle is so narrow is good because it means you're not getting bullshit hits all the time. You need to have some degree of patience and skill to pull off hits. The main change I would make for Nemesis is to improve the zombie AI to get more value out of them. A lot of the times when you run the survivors close to zombies, like it doesn't make any sense how they don't hit. You know what I mean? Like they're like right on top of them, but they don't connect because of like latency through turning, or they get stuck constantly and then just stay there. So you have to physically go out your way to kill the zombie to get it to respawn. The AI is good for a first implementation of some sort of live AI into the game, but I think it could do a lot of work with making it better and making it a lot more and getting more value out of it, because obviously that's part of your ability as well as Nemesis, is to get passive pressure through the zombies. And if you know the zombies 90% of the time aren't even going to connect with hits that they're going through, unless you're literally like right on top of someone, then they don't really pose much of a threat. And I'm not saying that they should be a major threat, I just think they should be doing more than they do at the moment, and that would make me happier. And finally, new killer, Pinhead. I again, not played a lot of Pinhead, so it's hard for me to really kind of get in depth and say, oh, I would make this change, I'd make that change. I think he's in a really good position. I like these kind of buck the trend of not ridiculously impressive in a 1v1 that's been the case with a lot of the killers in the last few releases. But for me, I would say the main change I would like to see is a more reward for long range chains attacks. Like, I think if you hit a chain attack from further away, the chain should be harder to break for Survivor, because at the moment, if you hit a long range chain shot, you don't really get any reward for it. Like, it slows them down briefly, but not anywhere near enough to get any sort of value out of it, which therefore makes using that very, very not worth it. Like, there's a lot of these add-ons that are around the range that you can send the chains, but why would you run that when you do even connect with them, you get no benefit out of it? So I'd like to see like something like that. Like, if you hit a chain, like the further away you hit your chain from, the longer it takes a survivor to break out. So you get more reward out of it, because obviously the mechanic of trying to land the chain, unless you land directly on top of a survivor, is incredibly difficult. So you're obviously using an incredibly difficult mechanic, and obviously you've got no movement while you're doing it, so you're not gaining ground while you're doing it, and then they basically break free and start running anyway. So I'd just like to see a little bit more around that, just to give you a bit more reward. So there we are, guys. One change to every killer in Dead by Daylight. Apologies for the length, it's obviously quite a long time to get through 25 killers. But yeah, this is just stuff that I say quite a lot if I play on stream or I play on videos and stuff like that. Changes I'd make to killers playing as or against. So I thought it'd be good to put it into a video. But thank you for watching. Please like the video, please subscribe to the channel. As always, I've been LuboATM, and until I see you guys next time, peace.